Hello and welcome. My name is Craig Hatch, President of the Jackson County Chamber, and thanks for joining us today for this District 7 Congressional Forum with the incumbent, Tim Walberg, and his opponent, Gretchen Driskell. If we get anything out of this today, everyone, is vote. Make sure your vote counts. To learn more about where, when, and how to vote, go to jacksonchamber.org. Now, before we begin, let's hear a little bit from our sponsors.
Hello, I'm Brent Ellis, President at Spring Arbor University. I wish we could be together in person, but as is pretty much the norm today, all of these events are taking place virtually. And so rather than me looking you in the eye and thanking you for the amazing ways that you all contribute to the economic growth of Jackson County, and JAXPO, what a great organization. To ensure from the Chamber of Commerce that we do work together and we, to see the true economic impact that we have. Spring Arbor University, I want you to understand and know, over $80 million of economic impact in Jackson County annually. More than 600 jobs created through what we provide. It's an amazing thing, and we want to continue to be a good partner with Jackson County. I'm excited that we're still having this event virtually. Again, as I said, I wish we could be there in person so that we could, I could get to know some of you in even greater ways. But listen, we would love to host you. If you want to come and see some of the clinical spaces that we have that are just absolutely tremendous for our nursing, if you want to come and see what we're doing from an engineering perspective and see the new home that we have right on the center of campus, for our engineering program, come and visit. We'd love to host you. Ron Griffith, or myself, Doug Wilcoxon, any of us would love to host you and show you around the tremendous progress that Spring Arbor University is making in their facilities and the program offerings, because we do indeed want to be a great partner for Jackson County.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. The Chamber is very excited today to have Kathy Schmaltz as our moderator. Kathy is a former news anchor for WILX Channel 10 and host of In Focus, which was an interview cable show. She's also a great leader in our community, sitting on several boards, including the Henry Ford Allegiance Health Foundation and Michigan Theater. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. This is a debate for the Michigan District, 7th Congressional District, and we welcome everybody here. We'd also like to say hello to our candidates. We have incumbent Republican Congressman Tim Walberg and Democratic challenger Gretchen Driskell. Thank you for being here, both of you. Can you both hear me? Everybody bear with us here. This is virtual, so we're all working everything out. And by the way, everybody is socially distanced here, so we are adhering to all the rules.
Kathy, it's good to be here.
Oh, thank you, Tim. There, now we can hear you. How about Gretchen? Is she there?
I can hear you, but I'm not sure. I don't have a camera and it's not on my side. So,
all right.
If it's blocked.
Well, let's see. We still go ahead. All right. We'll go ahead anyway. We can hear you, and that's the most important, right? All right. Let's go over some rules from the chamber. The candidates will have 1 minute for opening and closing statements, 2 minutes to answer each question. Questions will come from the chamber, its members, and myself, and questions have already been submitted. Please, no interruptions from the candidates. Speak in your allotted time and keep to the issue being discussed. Okay, we'll start with the opening statements. Again, you have 1 minute, and Republican Congressman Tim Walberg, you go first.
Kathy, thank you for being here, and it's a privilege to be part of this great 7th district, which includes the heart of the district, the birthplace of the Republican Party, Jackson, Michigan. I've had the privilege of representing the district now into my 6th term. Very gratified for the past term to be given the name of the most effective member of the Michigan delegation. That we tried to earn, not just to be given that title from the Center for Legislative Effectiveness out of Vanderbilt University and the University of Virginia, but to represent the district well, to keep the promises that we made. we've attempted to do that, and I think we've done it well. And for that reason, we've had the opportunity to be effective, working in a bipartisan way to work on issues relative to this district, whether it be rural broadband or whether it be healthcare. Dealing with this COVID right now, we've been strongly involved in bringing dollars and resources back from the federal government to the 7th District and to the state of Michigan. We worked on senior issues, trying to provide security for them, and then of course on opioid, heroin abuse, and all of that. We've worked to do what we said we would do in representing this district. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Walberg. Okay, Democratic challenger, Gretchen Driskell, you have 1 minute.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I'm excited to be working with the Jackson community. I'm a grandma and a former mayor of the city of Saline, and I was honored to work alongside a lot of our community members to make sure Saline was a strong, healthy place. We were awarded by CNN Money Magazine the top 100 small cities 3 times in a row during my mayorship as one of the best places in the country to live, work, and play. I do have a track record of working across the aisle and making sure we are productive for all our citizens. I think there's time for a change in Washington. I hear regularly folks are very concerned about how things are going with the economy and pandemic, affordable health care, making sure we have access to good paying jobs. And I'm looking forward to sharing all our views on these positions here today. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Let's begin with the major issue, COVID-19. How do you feel the state has handled the pandemic? Do you think the restrictions have been too strong? How do you think the federal government has handled it? Did the federal government do enough? And would you have done anything differently? Mr. Walberg, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think this is something we've never experienced before. As I said to our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, when she was in front of the committee in which I reside, Energy and Commerce, I said, you know, Governor, we've done this for the first time, both of us. We've never experienced before. We're going to do some good things. We're going to make some mistakes, and hopefully we'll learn from it. But I think the federal government stepped up very quickly, closed the borders for travel from China very quickly, and I think that saved a lot of lives. We put millions of dollars of tools back to the states, whether it was masks, gowns, shields, money to be used for various purposes. We passed the largest bipartisan CARES Act that included PPP, that kept our businesses at least moving forward, though in a struggling way at times. And so we've done a lot of stuff here. I think in the state, the restrictions, at least for the first 8 weeks, the guidance coming from the federal government to work together to try to get a handle on it. But as time has gone on, a one-size-fits-all plan for our state and for the restrictions that sometimes didn't make sense, especially when you put ill patients back in nursing homes and see 1/3 of all of our deaths resulted from nursing home deaths. That's a problem. I hope we learn from that. And I hope that that's something that other governors learn from, sadly, from our state.
Ms. Driskell, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, you know, fundamentally, our federal government did not respond sufficiently to what's happening, which is why 7 months later, we're still struggling as a country. Our country should be working together across the states with common systems on ability to address this. And we need to be doing contact tracing and testing to make sure that we can open our schools successfully and safely, our businesses. And I know for many of us, we're really struggling with our family members at home, worried about their health and welfare. I personally have a granddaughter that is 3.5 that isn't able to even go to her childcare right now because she's got a new baby in the home. And so I know from talking to many people, there's a tremendous amount of frustration with the lack of systems and the ability for people to think about each other and wear face masks when it's appropriate, and make sure that we protect the health and welfare of everyone in our community. Because fundamentally, what every decision that every person makes affects the people around them. We know now that this is a very, very contagious virus. We do not have a vaccine, and we have months to go before we will be successfully able to address this pandemic properly. And fundamentally, the United States has failed compared to the rest of the world. We have less than 5% of the population and over 20% of the deaths. As a matter of fact, Italy, which was hit so hard early on, If we had the per capita death rate that Italy has, we would have 80,000 less deaths at this point in time. So we are talking about human lives, and it is a very important, fundamentally, the role of our country is to protect the health and welfare of our citizens. And I think the federal government has fallen down on that job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The World Health Organization just came out Monday and said lockdowns should not be the primary focus of dealing with this pandemic. Small businesses have suffered tremendously in this district and all across the nation because of the lockdowns. What would you do financially to help small businesses get back on their feet again, financially or otherwise? What would you do? Ms. Driskell?
Sure, I agree. I don't think lockdowns are the solution. And as a former business owner, as a former mayor who worked diligently with the small businesses in my community, I was the municipal representative on the inter-area Spark Board, which did economic development countywide. I'm very pro-business, and actually the city of Saline got a lot of recognition and awards for our pro-business attitude. So fundamentally, I have friends and neighbors across this district and across Saline that are struggling because of the current situation. And again, it's because people have anxiety and uncertainty, and businesses cannot succeed in a community where there's uncertainty. So until we have systems in place, we are not going to be able to recover fully. So I do not think the lockdown is the answer. I think we need to be doing contact tracing. We can do quarantines. Other countries are doing things to address the issues more successfully than we are, and we can follow their models.
What specifically would you do to help small business?
I think, well, first of all, right now, there is a bipartisan package in in the Washington, D.C., that could help small businesses with additional PPP. And there's actually some opportunity to address the Main Street program in the Federal Reserve. There's some allocated money, about $600 billion that hasn't been fully distributed to banks. And there is some opportunities, but fundamentally, I think we are seeing actually across the world that there's a second surge that the scientists have been calling for since this summer is starting to happen. It's starting to happen here in Michigan. And we have to do what science says. And science says when you wear a mask, you protect 80% of the time people are wearing masks, the disease is not transmitted. So fundamentally, we can start with that. Incumbent Tim Walberg has been out in public saying wearing masks is not requirement or necessary. And I completely disagree. And until people have faith in the health of our communities, we're not going to get shoppers in the stores at the level that we should be able to do. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Walberg?
Well, thank you. Lockdown isn't a way to continue this process. Initially, as we caught up to what was going on, I understood that. But it's not what will produce what we need to have in this country for an economy that grows forward, but also for the health and welfare of individuals, whether they be employees or employers. We're seeing tremendous negatives result from this extended lockdown experience. With people, the suicide rate has increased. The suicide hotline in Michigan, according to what I was told from state legislators just recently, has increased by 1,800%. That speaks to a problem that we have to address, and that's not done by lockdown. I've never said that people shouldn't wear masks, so I would like to point that out. Whether it's the panacea is debatable. There ought to be an all of the above plan to keep ourselves safe and encourage others as well. And we should do the things we've been trained on for 7 months now with personal sanitation, keeping clean, staying away if we're sick, wearing the masks, keeping proximity issues, but ultimately we can't live this way for life. The PPP plan that we put forward that my opposition said in her TV ad that was a slush fund. I don't think so. That saved over 12,500 jobs in Jackson alone. It's been a good plan. It was ramped up very quickly, and it was amazing how our institutions, finance institutions, work with that. We have bills in Washington that could move that forward with $137 billion of funds not expended for PPP that has already been appropriated, and yet the Democrats refuse to bring that out of the House. We've tried to discharge it without any effect at this point in time. There are ways that we can deal with the issues, but we have to have the majority party in the House and Chuck Schumer in the Senate come together to say, listen, we can work on the things that work for COVID, Let's leave all the rest of the stuff, the Green New Deal, the energy solutions, et cetera, leave them on the table later on and move forward with helping our country get back.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to ask you both, just really quick, yes or no. Would you take a vaccine if it came out right away? Mr. Walberg?
Yes.
Ms. Driscoll?
Yes.
Okay. The economy and healthcare are the top two issues of concern to voters in this election. What are your thoughts about the Affordable Care Act known as Obamacare? Many people have, lost their healthcare because of some of these businesses shutting down. What would you do about pre-existing conditions? Does any plan with the Republicans and the Democrats, do they cover pre-existing conditions? And again, about the Affordable Care Act, how do you feel about that? Mr. Walberg?
The pre-existing condition solution to the Affordable Care Act, or the solution that included pre-existing conditions, that was passed by the House and sent to the Senate, was rejected by the Democrats and sadly, John McCain. The president was ready to sign it. It was an amazing alternative to what was called the Affordable Care Act that is neither affordable or does it give care. It gives a policy in hand, but when people go to use it with the out-of-pocket expenses, the deductibles, they can't use it. It's too expensive. People have come to love, generally speaking, the employer-supplied healthcare plans that are available. With what this team of Biden and Harris are promoting, as well as the Democrat Party, moving away from Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act and going to a one-size-fits-all Medicare for all or single-payer plan is not something that will be supported by people in general. When they lose their employer supplied plan, or think of all the union members, that one of the best benefits they've received from being a member of the union is having a negotiated healthcare plan that has benefits that impact them positively. So I do not support the Affordable Care Act, so-called Affordable Care Act, because it doesn't work. It has fallen apart in many ways, and it's on life support right now. And when my Democrat colleagues, in fact, campaigned on fixing it and replacing it, I don't see how they can support it either. We support pre-existing condition coverage. I'm on record, and in fact, on vote record for supporting that. And we will continue to work toward a solution that gives choice, patient-centered approach, that gives the doctor and the patient the ultimate decision of what their health care is.
Ms. Driscoll?
First of all, as far as the ad that I put out about your vote on the COVID, what we were pointing out is the multi-million dollar, actually billion-dollar slush fund that was set up with lack of accountability. And I personally know businesses that were not able to access funds because there was such a lack of accountability. So it's, as you know, because I've been in your office requesting funding for local governments and support multiple times as a representative of all the cities across the state of Michigan in my leadership roles with the Michigan Municipal League. So what we were calling out was the slush fund. And it's really sad to see that you can't tell the difference between that and the aid to our communities and our businesses. So
PPP.
as far as the Affordable Care Act, I do support the current Affordable Care Act. The incumbent, Mr. Walberg, has had the opportunity to fix whatever. They had the first 2 years of the presidency, all Republican majority, the Senate, the House, and the president, and they were unable to do it. And the reason why is because the pre-existing condition program that they had was not sufficient. It did not do and cover at the level that the current Affordable Care Act does cover. And I would also like to point out that there's 20 million more people across the country that do have access to healthcare that didn't before. Additionally, while I was in the state legislature, part of the Affordable Care Act allowed us to do Medicaid expansion. So we had, up until recently, over 600,000 citizens here in the state of Michigan. It was a bipartisan proposal of an expansion of healthcare. Those folks were able to access healthcare, and we're now up at over 800,000 because of the pandemic. So we have some serious problems with our healthcare, and we know that there is a serious challenge with COVID and the disparity in the communities and how it affects our minority communities in particular. So I think we really need to be doing a better job. I support expanding the Affordable Care Act, providing a public option. I do support the right of folks to have private insurance also and have their own doctors. I've never said anything to the difference. And I would appreciate it if Mr. Walberg would stop putting words in my mouth and let me speak for myself. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Walberg, would you like to respond 30 seconds?
Well, her ad specifically referred to PPP. That bill that she had with the citation underneath it was PPP. That is not a slush fund. That helped many businesses. It was necessary to keep them moving forward, to keep employer opportunities in place as well. And I'll also state that our bill that included pre-existing condition coverage was fully covering those pre-existence. So this mantra that's out there that it didn't, I would like my opponent to actually look at the legislation as opposed to taking talking points from the Democrat side of the aisle, specifically Nancy Pelosi, who fought it all the way through.
Mr. Scott, you have 30 seconds. Would you like to respond?
Sorry?
Ms. Driskell, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. I'm not accountable to anybody except my constituents. And all I know is every day that I'm out in the district, I run into people that can't afford healthcare, that can't afford prescription drugs. And he's had an opportunity to fix it. For 10 years, he's been in office. And people are tired of that, saying, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. It's not happening. So I think it's time for a change.
All right.
Well, that's the Affordable Care Act. That's the problem.
No, it's the representation.
That's what's in there right now. That's why they don't have coverage, because they can't afford to use it once they take it off of the policy. With the pre-existing conditions, that's fine. But if you can't use the policy that's in place because it's a one-size-fits-all, socialist appointed system, it doesn't work. And we need to fix it with a private sector existing condition coverage, yes, but also patient choice, patient-centered, not government-centered.
Ms. Driskell, or would you like to move on?
I think we're going to agree to disagree. This is not a coverage that is sufficient compared to what we have in place. So we can agree to disagree on this.
Okay, let's move on to the U.S. Supreme Court. As you know, that's been a big issue in the presidential campaign. The Republicans are moving ahead to fill the seat vacated by the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Those hearings are going on. The majority of Americans polled said that the vacancy should be filled after the presidential election. And then there's the question of packing the court. Packing the court does not mean filling the vacancy. It means adding more justices to the court. There have been 9 justices on the U.S. Supreme Court for 150 years. Democrats have been asked about packing the court. Many people believe that if you do pack the court, it takes away all our checks and balances and it just becomes another legislative body. Kamala Harris, the vice presidential Democratic candidate for president, says she's open to discussing that. Joe Biden has not given a yes or no answer. He did say he's not a fan of packing the court, but he never answered the question. The Republicans are against it. So there are 2 issues here, filling the vacancy and packing the court. And Ms. Driskell, you can go first.
So as far as filling the vacancy, I think that the majority of the United States citizens think we should wait till after the election. It's less than 3 weeks away. And, this process is completely different than last time the previous sitting president was in place. So I think it's very disappointing, but obviously it's moving forward. So I'm one of those kind of people that likes to look forward on how to fix things. I do not support packing the court. I think that we have Supreme Court in place, and I hope that they do the job of representing all rights and equal rights for all of our citizens. I know the Affordable Care Act is up for review, and I'm concerned. I know a lot of people are very, very concerned about what's going to happen to their health care. So that's a big concern that I have. And I think the bigger issue is campaign finance reform. I think our systems are completely broken in Washington, D.C. There's too much money in politics, and the incumbent has taken a ton of money from special interests and forgotten about the folks here in town.
Mr. Walberg?
Well, thank you, Kathy. And I'm glad to hear that my opponent does oppose packing the court. I wish we could get former Vice President Biden and Senator Harris to take a stand on it, because the people deserve the right to know. As far as filling the vacancy, it's a constitutional requirement for a president to fill a vacancy when there is a vacancy on the Supreme Court. The president, just like Barack Obama, offered a replacement nominee for that. The Senate is required to give advice and consent under the Judge Garland nominee. The Senate gave advice and consent. They didn't consent to it, and they gave advice that we aren't going to put him on the court. I don't see anything wrong with that. In this case, had it been turned about, Democrats would have moved to fill this seat if they'd been given the opportunity. The president has done exactly what he should, and I think the polling will change with people having seen the unbelievable ability of this amazing nominee, Amy Coney Barrett. I mean, she's shown herself to be one that understands the Constitution and law, understands what she needs to do as a justice and what she can't do. She has been evidence that there are people out there who understand the purpose for a court, and it's not to be a legislative body. So I'm glad that it's going forward. The vote will be taken. The slot will be filled with a great jurist, and we'll move on from here. To pack the court would simply say, as you, I think, rightly said already, we have another legislative body when the Constitution doesn't give either the need for that or the ability to have another legislative body.
Okay, Mr. Walberg, let's talk about the people in the 7th Congressional District, your constituents. What type of action have you taken, either legislative-wise from bills? What have you done to help voters in your district? And why should they re-elect you?
Well, that's you're talking about my favorite people, the people of the 7th District. And every day we go to work thinking, how can we fulfill the obligation and the privilege we've been given to represent them? And so let's make things good. And I think that's why I was again named the most effective member of the Michigan delegation by a nonpartisan group of all places, Vanderbilt University and University of Virginia, because we were able to work in a bipartisan fashion to get things done, to be selected to be put on the most powerful committee in Congress, the longest standing committee, Energy and Commerce, that deals with almost every single issue relative to my district. So we worked on energy issues. We worked on Great Lakes Restoration Initiative to make sure that we got this president to understand that the Great Lakes are a resource that we need to preserve. And so now we've got for the first time a 5-year extension of Great Lakes Restoration Initiative that also increases the funding to $475 million beyond what the original was, 300. Both President Obama and President Trump originally opposed extending that. President Obama gets it now. We worked on that. We worked on something very important to Jackson County. That's opioid heroin abuse issue. And working in concert with Debbie Dingell, a bill that I sponsored and she was my prime co-sponsor called Jesse's Law. We got that into law, signed by the president. They'll impact people in my district and protect them from some things that we could protect them from relative to that issue. And what we've seen with Mike Hurst and his involvement, Chris Reisner probably would be alive if the resources that now we see being developed in Jackson County with resources coming from federal government, but most importantly from the private sector, were in place with Andy's place. So those are things we do for the people. Tax reform, tax reduction we passed, co-sponsored legislation do that, regulatory reform that made it more possible for business. And remember, before March, we had the strongest economy this country had ever known, the lowest unemployment rate for all minorities. And that's a good thing, and I worked on all of that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Walberg. Mr. Driskell, why do you think you should take Mr. Walberg's place in Congress? What legislation or other ideas do you have that differ from his? And why do you think you can do a better job?
Well, I think he's out of touch with the voters, and while he says that he's done good work, I think it's too little too late. I'm very thrilled that he did a bipartisan package to help address opioid addiction. It is a bill that helps for people that are recovering to be protected in the hospitals. I think that's a great thing, but the fact of the matter is we have thousands of people that have been become addicted to opioids in this district and across our country, and he didn't do anything for many years. When I was mayor in 2010, we started with a red barrel, and then when I got elected to the State House, we started doing work around the database. I've been working on this issue for years and years, and in the meantime, he voted for drug immunity for pharmaceutical companies when he was in the State House. So he's protecting the corporate side. I think fundamentally, the people that I hear in this district are not saying low unemployment before the pandemic, sure, but there are tons of people that are working multiple jobs because they don't make enough money to put food on the table and a roof over their heads for their families. So I think that is a huge issue. I think the conversation about having the best economy, we actually had a strong economy, but we also had record debt level and the highest debt level as a percentage of the GDP than any time in US history since World War II. So fine, we had a strong economy and huge deficits. I'm an accountant. I have my MBA, and when you have a deficit in a strong economy, how do you ever pay that deficit down? I think it's ridiculous that all he talks about is a strong economy, while my grandkids are going to be burdened with a legacy of this incredible deficit. And now when it's time to really do something for the small businesses here in our communities, he's saying, well, it's a boondoggle. That's what I've heard him say multiple times. So I would like to see a change in our representation. I have represented our communities here in Washtenaw County, in Saline, and across the Washtenaw County as a state representative. I understand the issues. We need to be investing in infrastructure, rural high-speed internet, broadband is really important, and also lowering prescription drug costs. Those would be the first two things I'd be working on.
Thank you. We're a country divided in many ways right now on a lot of issues. There are extremes on both sides, Republicans and Democrats. Can you name a single issue or policy in which you disagree with your party overall? Ms. Driskell?
Yes, I don't support $15 an hour minimum wage. I've, as I mentioned, worked with small businesses, not only in my community, but across the district. And I think that that's too high for many of our small towns. I do think we need to have a living wage, and we need to do a COLA-based minimum wage around our community so that people will be able to be, like I said before, put food on the table. We have long food bank lines right now. We have record number of kids taking free and reduced lunch programs. Clearly, we know from the United Way that your United Way in Jackson County and the United Ways across Michigan recently put out their annual report on the asset limited income constrained households. And we know that over 40% are living paycheck to paycheck. And if they have an emergency, they don't have the cash for it.
Mr. Walberg?
Well, I think I mentioned already my disagreement with my president on the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. We've changed his mind. Now he's fully supportive of it. And so that's not a disagreement anymore. I believe our party has been very strong on limiting government, reducing spending, and that's not the party that my opponent is going to join and will support, as history records over and over again, what Speaker Pelosi asks, Speaker Pelosi gets. The issue is showing the ability to stand up in both in the state legislature and in Congress. I've been willing to stand up strong and vote no, and that was necessary, and vote yes, and work in a positive compromise when we could do that as well. As I recollect, my opponent spent 2 terms in the state legislature, never passing one single bill, not one. And as mayor, she was just a member of the city council. It was not a strong mayor position. So her leadership was alongside of all of the other members. So again, we've demonstrated just the opposite in Congress, working with a bipartisan effort as much as possible. That one bill I mentioned with Debbie Dingell, that's one of many bills that have just been signed into law recently in a Democrat majority in the House, working with a colleague of mine, a Democrat from this other side of the aisle. We impacted the retirement savings opportunities for senior citizens. With Yvette Clark from New York, another Democrat colleague of mine, we effected a change in robocalls, the one-ring robocall, working together. I had those bills last term. They didn't get across the line in the Senate because they were blocked by Chuck Schumer. We got it across the line with Democrat sponsorship this time, with me being prime co-sponsor. So we work hard to represent the people of this district, and those are the facts. Those aren't opinions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Walberg. I think we all know the difference between a peaceful protest and a riot, looting, and burning things down. But where would you draw the line? What if you were in Seattle or Portland where they're burning things down and rioting? What if that happened here? What would you do? And could you also address the call for defunding the police? Mr. Walberg?
Well, defunding the police is the most idiotic thing I've ever heard in my life. As I think it was John Adams who early on said that if we were angels, we wouldn't need government. But we aren't angels. We need government, and we need law enforcement that punishes the doer of evil and rewards the doer of good and protects them. We've seen the attacks on the police as a result of rioting, and in some cases demonstrations that have spoken for the wrong issues. But I, for one, will fight to protect the right of anybody and everybody to demonstrate in this country on their issues of concern, whether I agree with them or not. But when they cross the line and they begin to destroy and cause destruction of people's properties, livelihoods, or impact on people's persons themselves, the displays we've seen of rioting, senseless rioting, destroying communities, their own communities, shooting police, ambushing them, that's wrong, and it must be stopped. And it's about time for people of all goodwill, and especially leaders, Democrats and Republicans, to link arms together and say, this has to stop. These are not peaceful for protests.
This was happening here. What would you be in favor of bringing in the National Guard?
I would be in favor of bringing the National Guard. I would be in favor, first and foremost, supporting the troops that we have, our police forces, standing with them, giving them the resources that are necessary, and informing people from a bully pulpit that I would have as a member of Congress, standing and saying, listen, folks, demonstrate all you want, but stop the rioting, stop destruction. Then if we couldn't control it with our own police agencies, then yes, absolutely, we ought to have the National Guard, whatever it takes to restore peace and safety to our communities. That's what moms and dads are crying for these days. Peace and security in their neighborhoods. That ought to be there. Riots don't produce that.
Thank you. Ms. Driskell?
Sure. So first of all, I just wanted to point out a few things that Mr. Walberg brought up regarding my service. I did actually serve as a representative on the vice chair of the Michigan Municipal League, and we did work and represent across the state. And we did attend meetings in your office multiple times to try to get funding for community-oriented policing, community development block grants, and transportation infrastructure. So your talk about how we don't do the work to make sure that I haven't done the work to make sure that good things happen here in the district is incorrect. And not only did I do it for Saline, but I did it across the state with people. And you also have a track record of, you were actually written up in the State House as being a member of the No Caucus out of 110 people. And the reason that we did not pass any bills is because I was in the minority. So I would just say that when you have a conversation about that, you should think about your record of your 10, 12 years and how many bills you passed up until recently. There were not very many. So I think you're kind of the pot calling kettle black there. And then as far as, you know, I've been to over a dozen peaceful protests here in the 7th Congressional District, in small towns across the district. I've also been to several in Jackson. And what I've seen is young people, actually people from all generations and all backgrounds, but mostly young people. And they're rising up because they see a significant level of injustice that's happening in their communities. And they're very, very frustrated, whether or not we're talking about climate change or educational affordability, and most recently the pandemic and the restrictions to being able to graduate from school, the inability of the federal government to address the challenges that we're having at the local level. There's an incredible level of frustration, and that's going to translate into votes this year. So I think we'll see a different outcome. But fundamentally, we need to do a better job for the people, all the people across the district, not just the select few.
Well,
and as far as
you didn't really answer the question about what you would do if there were riots here or burning.
Sure. So as mayor, I stood on the front lines with our police department during Y2K. As a matter of fact, that evening I was in the police department. Also 9/11, during the downfall in the economy. I have been a partner in our police department while the Republicans have been cutting government funding for decades. And also, as I mentioned, at the federal level. So the whole concept that I would support police defunding is ridiculous. And that accusation was also made in this TV commercial. So I would just say that Mr. Walberg should let me talk for me and not put words in my mouth, because I do have a very strong record of working with public safety and making sure that our communities are safe. And I've fought for that not only here in my county, but also in Lansing and also in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Mr. Walberg, would you like to respond?
Well, I guess I'd say then you ought to be more careful who you align yourself with. That says their key issue, those being the graduate student union at University of Michigan, one of their key issues is defunding the police. You signed on in support of that. So you need to be more careful, I guess, in reading what you're signing on. And in fact, again, that's why I've been selected as the most effective member of an amazing delegation, the Michigan delegation. We work together well in a bipartisan way, but we've worked in a bipartisan way, and we've got bills passed into law. And that's the issue that we're supposed to be doing. So I'm not putting words in your mouth. You just have to stop saying those things through your support and the efforts you join alongside of. And I've always supported the police with funding as well.
Yeah, so I supported the graduate students because they wanted a safe workforce and because the government wasn't helping out with protecting the health and welfare of our citizens. At the time that I supported the graduate students, they did not have that as part of their platform, number one. And number two, I have to say that, you know, we have a huge opportunity to do good work in this district by investing in infrastructure and creating good paying jobs. And we've had a long time to try to make that happen with the incumbent, and it hasn't been happening. So I know a lot of people in this district that are looking for better representation, and I would look forward to having that opportunity.
Okay. Let's move on to some other topics. Let's talk about the Second Amendment. What's your position on that, Ms. Driskell?
I support the Second Amendment. I have a family of the military from generations that have fought for our country. My son is currently a naval aviator. My grandfather was a naval rear admiral in the Navy. I've been a strong proponent of public safety and health, and I think that I support safe communities, being on the ground, being threatened by someone and not knowing whether or not they had a weapon. Of course, I have some concerns. I want to make sure that we have safe communities, but I definitely support the Second Amendment. Want to make sure that we have safe communities. I do support universal background checks, unlike the incumbent, and I do support better coverage of mental health. Guns are number one. When Mr. Walberg was talking about suicides earlier, the easiest way to commit suicide is with guns, and we have some, as was mentioned, some serious problems. We actually had very serious problems with suicide before the pandemic. So I definitely support the Second Amendment.
Mr. Walberg?
Well, I just continually get amazed at people who say they support the Second Amendment, but then have all sorts of caveats on how we restrict the peaceful use and full use of the amendment. And I pull from my pocket regularly this little document that's called the Constitution, and it simply says this: that a civil society, a country that is really in place to support all of its citizens, it says a well-regulated militia being necessary in the security of a state, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's as simple as it gets. And so you can talk about background checks, universal background checks. You can talk about the fact that guns are sometimes used in committing suicide and committing crimes as well. But you can't get past the simple statement of the Constitution. Now, if you want to change that to say that shall not be infringed except for a universal background check, which isn't the problem. Criminals don't get background checks, and they'll have those guns anyway. It's people like me and you, law-abiding citizens, that will go through the process. But this Constitution says we have a right to keep and bear arms. In fact, in the context, it almost says we have a responsibility to keep and bear arms for a well-regulated and secure society.
Okay, what is your position on abortion, including late-term abortions and federally funded abortions, Mr. Walberg?
Declaration of Independence says that all men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights, namely among those the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's an inalienable right. It's assumed because life is a gift of God. And through our history in the United States, we have overwhelmingly for the majority of time this country has been around, we've supported life. And we've said that a baby, a child, is a gift of God. It's a human being that needs protection. And when they are the most vulnerable, they need more protection. And we know that there are times when people make decisions that end in something they didn't expect. But that's where society needs to come, whether it's churches or families or communities step up to assist people through those difficult times. But to take the life and violate what our country was based upon, that inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And with the advents of medical technology, and now we have ultrasound that can show us early on that that's nothing more than a human being unbelievably forming in the womb of a young lady. We know that that's a human and it needs to be protected. So I am pro-life, not simply pro-choice as people try to candy coat it. I'm pro-life from conception to natural death. And I will stand on that. That's a conviction that I not only will live for, but would die for as well.
Ms. Driskell?
I support the right of a woman to make a decision about her body and in consultation with her family, her faith, and her doctor. I think that government does not belong in this decision. And I personally, my personal experience with this is I was adopted. So I'm very happy that my mom made that, my birth mother made that decision to have me adopted as an infant. But I don't think government belongs in this. And I think it's a woman's decision and it's a private decision. I know I'm more interested in making sure that the children that are born are taken care of properly. We're not doing that as a country. We have one of the highest infant mortality rates in the world for an industrialized nation. We have, as I mentioned earlier, children in our communities living in poverty with an inability to have a roof over their head. We're not properly, we're not properly educating them, and fundamentally, we are not providing for the equal welfare for all of our children.
Do you support late-term abortion or federally funded?
I don't think government belongs in this discussion.
Okay, let's talk about immigration. Ms. Driskell, what do you think needs to be done to fix the immigration system?
I think that we need a bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform. That's something that we've been talking about for a long time. And I think that when we do that, we have a process that, number one, we need to have safe and secure borders. I certainly support that. But we know that we have a lot of folks here working in the communities across the country, and we need those workers. I have friends that are small business owners that talk a lot about the ability to have the importance of having a strong workforce. When I was on the agriculture committee in the State House, that was one of the biggest issues, is the workforce on the ground and how hard it was, and they were actually having to leave crop on the ground. It's a huge issue that we have fundamentally not addressed successfully. We have people that are working here, going to school here, and they just want a path to citizenship, and there should be a way to do that that is meaningful and ensure folks that want to contribute to our society get the support to do that and are recognized as citizens. So the other thing that we also could be doing a better job, we know that 25% of our foreign, our venture capital based businesses were started by foreign-born entrepreneurs, and we should be doing a better job of reaching out and doing a better job with HB1 visa. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to improve. This is a country that is founded on immigration policies that were successful, and we can continue to do the good job for the people here in the state.
Mr. Walberg?
Well, I'm thankful for legal immigration. My grandparents came over, and I'm glad they came to the United States, no matter what I think of Sweden, and have enjoyed traveling to Sweden, enjoyed Swedish bakery stuff. That's all great, but America's the place to be. I think going back to the inimitable words of Sonny Bono, of all people, when he was in Congress and asked a question about illegal immigration, he just simply said, enforce the law. And I think that's what has been happening in recent months. In fact, how much have we heard about illegal immigration and people storming the borders like they were for a while? Why has that taken place? It's not simply because the wall has been increased, but primarily it's because we've used the law. We've cut some of the red tape. We need to do more of that to make sure that we have a workforce here that is necessary when we don't have our own homegrown citizens. But we've used the law, and we've said to people, if you want to come, come through our gates that swing wide and free. All we expect is that you follow the law, sign the guest book, and you follow the law once you're in the country as well. That's what's necessary. And I think we've seen some real change, legislation that I've supported that gave more opportunity, more resources on the ground for magistrates to move more quickly through adjudicating whether a person should be here or not. That's been helpful. Those type of things we can do more so. There certainly is other red tape areas we could look at, but right now the key is to follow the law that we have in place so that everybody comes here knows that they're being treated equally and justly according to any other person that's in this country.
We are now at the final question. So, Mr. Walberg, you answered this one first. We have a heated U.S. Senate race going on in our state between Democrat Gary Peters, incumbent, and Republican John James. Who do you support? I would assume it's John James, and why should he take Peters' place?
Well, I support John. Thanks for asking the question. And Gary Peters and I are friends. We're fellow motorcyclists. I chair the motorcycle caucus in the House. He chairs it along with Johnny Ernst in the Senate. And so we have some things in common. We have worked together in the past, but I think John brings something very unique and special to this position if he is elected. The background of his experience as a West Point grad, as a Ranger qualified helicopter pilot, Apache pilot, serving in combat situations, as running a business, a family business that he's expanded and grown in a very difficult time. His principles, his value principles, whether it be on the issue of life or whether it be on the issue of health care for the citizens of this country, I think he steps up and above my friend Gary's positions on those. I think he'll bring new insights as well, believing in America and its underpinning ideals, as I do. And I think I will be able to work with him very well in the U.S. Senate. So with all deference to my friend Gary Peters, I think John's time has come and will add much to the U.S. Senate.
Ms. Driskell?
So I support Gary Peters. I've worked with him. I think he's done a great job representing folks across the state of Michigan. He stepped up to serve after 9/11, and I think we all need to remember that people are making sacrifices every day. He recognizes that, and he's done a lot of work on making sure the Affordable Care Act and other things that actually help people are put in place. And so I think that he needs to be able to have an opportunity to continue that good work. I think when we have a majority in the Senate, a president that understands the issues that so many people in our district are facing with the economic inequality. We actually have the highest income inequality in the history of our country since the Great Depression. That is a problem that needs to be fixed, and it did not get fixed with the tax boondoggle, the Tax Reform Act that was passed in the first 2 years in Trump's administration under Mr. Walberg. We know that we've actually just created a huge deficit before we even got into the pandemic without any infrastructure or any significant benefits in place. So Gary Peters will do the work for the people, for the working people here, and help our small businesses. He understands those issues, and I think he deserves another chance to continue his good work.
Okay, thank you. We need to go to closing statements now. Believe it or not, it's been almost an hour. You both will have 1 minute, and Ms. Driskell, you'll go first.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and share my thoughts on how things are going in this district. Obviously, we have fundamentally different points of view on the direction of our district. I will say that I have served for many years, 20 years, in fact. I started in my public service as a volunteer, working alongside my community members to make sure we had a stronger community. And I worked across the aisle. There was no aisle, actually, in my town, but in Lansing and Washington, D.C., I had the opportunity to advocate for a lot of the issues that we're talking about today. And I was able to work with the two previous Congress members. One was a Republican and one was a Democrat. I was not able to work with the incumbent, and I continue to have that issue. I had to go to his office in Washington. Well, he never came to my city hall. I was mayor for those 14 years. Granted, not all that time he was in office, but a lot of that time he was. So I would just say I would be a representative of the people. I understand the issues. I've been a single mom without health care. I have addiction in my family, and I have struggled personally, economically. And I'm really proud of the community I live in and the role of service in my life, that I am committed to serving all of you and making sure that you have a representative that hears your issues, listens to you, and works hard
Okay.
and shows
Thank,
up.
thank you very much. Mr. Walberg?
Likewise, I appreciate the opportunity the Chamber's afforded us, and I appreciate representing the 7th District of Michigan that includes Jackson, the birthplace of the Republican Party, the Emancipation Party. I've tried to represent strongly my district, and I think, again, being named the most effective member of the Michigan delegation for my efforts on committees of power, of importance, and thrust, I think has been helpful to that. I've also been named 10th most using of live town halls member of Congress. Of all 535 members, only 9 others have held more live town halls. In fact, I need to remind the former mayor of Saline that she welcomed me to the city hall when I held one of my first town halls in Saline, and she was in a room for that. So I'm not sure why she forgot that I had come to her own community. I don't remember her being in my office in Washington, but she was always welcome and is always welcome. We welcome the insights of our constituents, but we represent them on the basis of the Constitution. We represent them on the basis of what we have said we would do for the people of the 7th District, and we look forward to that opportunity again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. It's always important for voters to understand your positions on different issues. And you both have answered a lot of questions today, but if there happens to be more questions that the viewers would like to know about, how can they contact you, Ms. Driskell?
Sure, my email is gretchen@votegretchen.com.
And Mr. Walberg?
Walbergforcongress.com.
All
I'm
right.
glad to hear from you.
Thank you again to the candidates for joining us. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting this event. And thank you to all of you watching out there. And thank you to our technical people too for keeping in our timer and everybody here at the Chamber. We appreciate it. And again, don't forget, less than 3 weeks away is Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd. Please don't forget to vote.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you. A great day.